Finding my speaking voice, from shy child to global speaker and trusted guide. Most people think great business communicators are born with natural charisma. I believe we are all born to be speakers, but sometimes we lose that voice in childhood. I was a painfully shy child who became an international speaker and now helps global leaders speak with influence to have an impact on the world. How is that possible? Here's how I discovered what creates executive presence. But first, I'd like to go back to the very beginning. I grew up in an Irish immigrant family. My grandfather left the farms of Galway in Western Ireland and took his family to London. My parents were old school Irish parents with a beat it out of you attitude to child raising. I got hit a lot as a boy. Belts, sticks, spoons, it all seemed normal at the time. At that time, there was still corporal punishment in schools. My brothers and I were genuinely surprised when other children told us that they weren't getting beaten by their parents. Now, I don't blame my parents. They were young, they had 4 children, and like most people, they were trying to do their best. However, the famous psychologist Dr. Gabor Mate emphasizes that physical punishment during childhood damages emotional development by forcing children to suppress their authentic feelings in exchange for attachment. This can cause problems later in life. For example, toxic shame, where you think, there's something wrong with me. In addition, this suppression rewires the brain's stress response system, making it harder for me to process difficult emotions healthily. For example, the older schoolboy who was bullying me on sports day found out the hard way. I broke a cricket bat on his head. Now, that wasn't the right thing to do. But many of the reasons why we freeze on stage have their roots in childhood trauma. My trauma was compounded by a painful traumatic divorce when I was age 17. Despite all this emotional distress, nothing was ever talked about in open. We had to stay silent, alone and silent. Feeling I'm alone with my pain developed into compulsive, addictive behaviors later on as I sought approval in all the wrong places. So my childhood took me from a young, outgoing boy growing up with my childhood friends to a painfully shy teenager, shamed in drama class for crying on the stage, avoiding presentation day age 17 by pretending to be sick because I was just terrified of saying the wrong thing. I was convinced by these experiences that I was not the kind of person to command a room. So my parents were right. They did beat it out of me. My ability to speak. I lost my voice. This fear of judgment stuck with me for many, many years, terrified I'd embarrass myself if I tried to speak up. University gave me the freedom to start over, but I fell in with the wrong crowd, partied hard, and failed the first year. Taking time out to work in a bank, surrounded by joyless adults, jolted me awake, and I returned with renewed focus, eventually graduating with honours in economic studies, proving to myself that I could overcome setbacks with discipline. Graduation didn't bring me clarity. I was directionless, without guidance, drifting between temp jobs and heavy drinking in London. I lacked the emotional maturity to face my challenges. It was a desperate time. I broke up with my girlfriend and left the country on a one-way ticket. While I had hoped for adventure and success, relocating geographically couldn't resolve the emptiness I felt inside. I took a bold entrepreneurial move, co-founding a web design startup, but we launched too early, lacked product market fit, experience, and financial discipline. The business collapsed within 6 months. Faced with bankruptcy and shame, my co-founder and I had a hard choice to make. Go home and start over, or double down and rebuild from nothing. I chose the harder path, enduring rejection, hustling non-stop, and slowly carving out a viable business. Through grit and perseverance, external success began to emerge, along with the first signs of internal strength. But beneath it all, my unresolved struggles remained. I numbed myself by drinking and distraction, and my journal reveals a roller coaster of highs and crushing lows. The business looked successful on the outside, but I wasn't whole, and success without inner clarity isn't sustainable. I often felt depressed. Then, in September 1999, I almost died 3 times in a single week. After a friend's wedding, I drove home and fell asleep in the car, waking up in the car park with the battery flat. I'd immaculately reverse parked, but I was shocked at how out of control my drinking had become. Strike one. Just a day later, there was a massive earthquake in Taiwan that killed thousands of people and felled many high rise buildings. Living on the 14th floor, I was awakened to see my wardrobe literally hopping from one side of the room to the other as the building swayed for minutes. Living in Taiwan, I frequently experienced earthquakes, but this was on another level. I heard the ripping, roaring sound of a building falling nearby. It was biblical. Everyone gathered outside in darkness, and fear gripped the air. Strike two. In the aftermath of the earthquake, power was on and off. I had to use candles to light the apartment. One night, I was awoken by my flatmate with the entire apartment filled with smoke. We thought the building was on fire and rushed outside, but quickly realized outside was fine. It was the candle in my bedroom which had melted my desk in a toxic plastic smoke bomb. Looking at the mess, I had that sick feeling to the stomach when you're going down a roller coaster. Strike three. Almost dying 3 times in a week caused sudden and massive action. It was like the world shaking me on the shoulders and saying, "Wake up, you fool." This was the moment I said, I have to change. I quit drinking. I had to fight for it. My football teammates gave me hell, but I stuck to it. It was the first time I made a deep personal decision and didn't flinch. That moment planted the flag of my resilience, a quiet inner belief that I could change, that my past didn't have to define my future. I realized my inner game led my outer behavior. I'd taken a tough personal decision to change, and this decision catapulted my personal productivity. I started closing bigger deals and managing a sales team. But despite the success, things were still hard. After years of struggling in the business, I realized my expertise wasn't the problem. It was how I communicated it. I was losing deals not because my solutions weren't good, but because I couldn't articulate their value clearly. Ironically, I was already giving over 100 client presentations a year. But despite this volume, I was still nervous, still fumbling, and still losing deals. Deep down, I felt inferior, haunted by the ghosts of my childhood. The pressure was unrelenting and the stakes were high. I didn't yet believe I was good enough. I looked for help, and it changed everything. I discovered an organization called Toastmasters International to improve my public speaking. The first time I went, I arrived a few minutes late. The meeting had already started. It was a formal sit-down meeting, and I froze by the door, too anxious to walk in. I turned around and left. I rejected the call. Deep down, I knew I should have gone in, but I couldn't get over that fear of embarrassment. What will people think if they see me walking in late? Have you ever felt that sometimes it's the decisions we don't make that hurt us the most? I was stuck in the same place for another 52 weeks. A full year passed before I went back, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life. The energy was positive, the people were supportive. I finally relaxed. I knew this was a place where I could grow. Learning to speak in public changed my life. It put me in control. I stopped waiting for something good to happen and started shaping outcomes I desired. I wanted to put a ding in the universe. I was soon to make a decision that would define my legacy. Today, that legacy still helps thousands find their voice and change their lives. But at the time, I was struggling professionally. I thought a slick slide deck made me look credible. I'd become obsessed with my presentation, but I wasn't building trust. I wasn't connecting. Something had to change. I had to start talking with people, not at them. I found the structure and the support to step up. I began speaking more confidently. I could stand in front of a room, make people laugh, hold their attention, and most importantly, be myself. I could share my stories, see the reaction, and feel the impact. I even began winning speech contests. For the first time, my words carried influence. My voice had weight. Then it hit me. I was in the wrong career. The strain of constant survival was taking its toll. I was burned out, and the relationship with my best friend, my business partner, suffered. We were always on, with no recognition and no balance. Ultimately, I made the tough call to end our partnership. Within 3 months, I cashed out of the business, leaving a lot of money on the table. After a short stint in trade marketing and publishing, I said yes to a new adventure in Shanghai, offered by a friend I'd met through Toastmasters. I arrived in Shanghai around midnight on September 11th, 2002. By 6 a.m. the next morning, I was already in a minibus headed to teach financial management to undergraduates at the University of Technology Sydney's joint venture with Shanghai University. That energy and drive would define my next 10 years in China. After a year of lecturing, I joined Ernst & Young as an internal English instructor, helping auditors pass essential exams and building online learning tools. But working under a rigid manager who stifled my own growth became suffocating. So I made a leap. I launched my own training consultancy. In hindsight, I might have done it differently. Perhaps joined another firm first, sought better mentorship. That's a recurring theme in my life, figuring things out the hard way. I did eventually hire a coach from Australia, and with her help, I built and developed my first program. There's a Chinese saying, you cross the river by feeling the stones. That slow, incremental approach to navigating uncertainty became my career philosophy. I threw myself into learning how to be a coach, a facilitator, an author. I joined an entrepreneurial group and explored what it would take to become a professional speaker. But the most pivotal moment came when I returned to Toastmasters, not just as a leader, not just as a speaker, but as a leader. As a non-profit organization, none of the leaders are paid. But previously, Toastmasters had helped me become a confident communicator. I felt I owed a debt. It was about vision and legacy, a chance to make a difference. As Steve Jobs said, to put a ding in the universe. An American colleague and I saw potential to grow Toastmasters in China. He brought empathy, I brought structure and execution. Together, we doubled membership in Shanghai, then reached out nationally and internationally. We successfully petitioned Toastmasters headquarters to recognize China efficiently, on the condition that we double club numbers again. We did. I persuaded the international president and executive director to fly to Shanghai for the first ever Toastmasters China conference, sparking national excitement. More importantly, we nurtured local leadership so the movement would thrive beyond expats. Today, Toastmasters in China has over 770 clubs, up from just 2 when I arrived. In 2007, I was honored in the Toastmasters International Hall of Fame. But this momentum came at a cost. I had invested over 1,000 volunteer hours that year. My own business was suffering. I'd given everything to help others find their voice, but I was losing my own again. Even as I helped others speak, I was still unsure if I deserved to be heard. So I turned back to my consultancy and published my first book, The 1 Minute Presenter, which became a landmark success. It was the first time I'd created my own structure and framework to be a better communicator, and it felt good. It opened doors across Asia, where I began helping people become better public speakers and communicators. I was invited to speak at international conventions and company events around the globe, and guest lecture at business schools. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of people felt natural. My voice was returning. I finally believed I had something to say, and others listened. Through all this, I noticed something surprising. Even successful executives struggled with the same issues I once faced. Articulating complex ideas clearly, building real connection with their audience, and presenting with credibility. Then it clicked. If I wanted to create real change, I had to start with the leaders. The CEO sets the culture, the leadership team shapes the climate. So I shifted focus. I began coaching leaders across industries and cultures, and I noticed a consistent pattern. Even brilliant leaders are unclear without knowing it. They confused rather than connected. They had authority, but struggled to be truly influential. I realized this during a coaching session with a former GE executive who was driving innovation at a global pharmaceutical company. She was subconsciously using the language and metaphors of machines and industry, GE language, without realizing that her symbolic language should have adapted to the metaphor of the body and ecosystem. This one change accelerated her promotion with more responsibility for digital strategy. That's when I developed my trusted leader framework, clarity, connection, credibility. This came from years of studying influence through 3,650 client events, workshops, academic research, including a master's in business psychology with distinction at the University of London, and analysing iconic business figures like Jack Ma. Clarity helps leaders say what matters. Connection builds trust without trying too hard. Credibility earns trust that lasts. And that became my focus, helping leaders master key moments of communication, teaching them how to inspire, not just inform, turning their message into real world impact. This is important because when leaders communicate better, they can win stronger investor trust. They can get promoted faster, win bigger key accounts, lower key talent turnover, a key competitive advantage, go to market quicker with products that fit, run more productive meetings. We have so many meetings, we have to have more productive meetings. Eliminate confusion and inefficiencies due to miscommunication, particularly in complicated, matrix-driven global businesses. They can drive complex change, even across borders and cultures. I've been lucky to have so many success stories. For example, one executive saved their job with a single presentation. Another landed a TEDx talk that catapulted their career. Others learned to influence board members, manage global teams, or take roles in new countries. Whether in a boardroom or on a triathlon course, performance comes down to mastering key moments. I once won a sprint triathlon by just 5 seconds, not because I was the most talented, but because I'd rehearsed the transitions obsessively. Leadership communication is the same. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to show up with clarity, connect authentically, and speak with credible authority when it counts most. That's what I help leaders do. In 2019, my life changed again when we had our daughter, after many years of trying and overcoming a tragic miscarriage. Inspired by Gabor Mate's advice again to simply be present, I rearranged my life to prioritize being there for her. I shifted almost entirely to virtual training. Once, when I did have a workshop in Tokyo, I hooked up a live video link so I could check in and see her. Having a daughter transformed my perspective. Love made me see what truly matters and how chasing material success alone feels hollow. I no longer needed the spotlight. I wanted to light the way for others. Yet, guiding her taught me a vital lesson. Trying to change others often means confronting our own limits and motivations. You can give skills, but real change happens only when it aligns with someone else's drive. This insight reshaped how I coach and guide by deeply understanding motivation and building from there. Now I listen before I lead. Today, my mission is to help leaders and experts find their speaking voice. But it's not just about delivering a great speech. I help leaders tap into their purpose so they can speak with real power. Because today's high-stakes conversations demand more than polished delivery. They demand courage, clarity, and influence across borders, cultures, and power structures. I've changed from the boy who was told to stay silent to the man who helps others speak with power and purpose to make the world better. Through every challenge and setback I've faced, I know transformation is possible. You can become more confident, more successful, and more purposeful in your life and career. I work with leaders and experts who want to make a difference, not just deliver results. But here's the truth. Even brilliant leaders struggle with invisible barriers. Are any of these familiar? Your message doesn't land. Your team lacks alignment. Your ideas are overlooked. You feel stuck. Your big purpose feels distant. Let's change that. My journey is personal, but the process is repeatable. If I can find my speaking voice, so can you, and I'd be honored to help. If you want to stop waiting and regain control with your communication and leadership, let's get things moving. My journey led me to find my speaking voice. Now let me help you find yours.